You are listening to the So Now What podcast with Lana Manikowski, episode number 116. Hey, ladies, happy Valentine's, depending on when you're listening to this. It is Valentine's Day on Wednesday, the 14th of February. And because of that, I decided that I wanted to talk about your relationship with your spouse and or your partner and how it is coming and showing up for you now that you know that you are going to be childless as a couple moving forward in your lives. And I might even start actually talking about where some of the disconnection and the animosity might have started for you, maybe some of the connections that you created because of the time that you went through your journey and how that's showing up in your relationship today. So I'm going to talk about the journey from a place of having the female factor infertility. And I know there's a lot of men out there who do have the male factor infertility. That was not my case. So the representation that I'm going to bring today is all talking about the one who is the infertile one in the relationship. And maybe some of the things that you've harbored towards your husband or your partner because of what you went through and some of the things that felt like it wasn't fair. Maybe some of the ways that you felt like things were so easy for them and you were really the one to bear the brunt of the infertility treatments and the weights and the phone calls and the shots and the medications and the ultrasounds and the blood draws and the countless things that we went through during our journey. And let me, first say that I'm bringing this to you from a place where I've worked through a lot of this stuff for me. And I want you to know that it's possible for you to regain a partnership with your husband that feels like you're in it together. And I'll tell you some of the ways that I used to feel when we were going through our journey. Like I'll just kind of rattle off some scenarios that come to my brain. Like I remember one of our first visits with the reproductive endocrinologist, and we were doing our initial workup, and Jack had to drop a sample off to the lab, and they, were obviously making sure and screening out that he wasn't the one who he also did not have infertility. And I remember standing at that window with him where he dropped the sample off, and he got called up later to get his report of his motility rates of his sperm. And the guy at the lab high-fived him. And it was like this proud moment of how motile his sperm was. And I remember like being happy, like, yay, it wasn't the two of us that had something to work through, but also feeling kind of envious that everything seemed all right with him, that he was not the problem and I was. And then I remember there being like me waiting for the phone calls and me having to deliver the news because I was the one who was getting the reports from my doctor and I was getting the counts and I was going for the blood draws in the morning and being the one to have to get my ass out of bed and go stand in line at 6 a.m. to hope that I'm one of the first ones to get the blood draw so that I can then continue on my day and show up to work acting like everything was okay. And Jack could just stay in bed and he could sleep and he didn't have to live that stress that I had to live. And I'm curious if you carry some of that envy maybe towards your partner, towards your spouse, that they didn't have to do the things that you had to do. And let me say, like, if I asked him to stand in line with me those mornings, I'm sure he would have, even though he's not a morning person and it's hard as hell to get his ass out of bed sometimes. I'm sure he would have done it, but there was, even though I didn't ask, I felt like there might be times where we carry this animosity towards them, that they didn't have to go through what we went through. And I want to tell you that you're not a bad spouse. You're not a bad wife if you feel those things. If you feel like they just don't understand the struggles that you've gone through and the heartache that you've dealt with because you are believing that it's your body that didn't show up in the relationship, I want to tell you that you don't have to carry that burden around. I'm guessing that if you had a conversation with your husband, that they would tell you that they're not mad at you. They're probably not angry with you. They probably don't wish that they would have married somebody else so that they could have a kid. Because, yes, you are not the only one who thinks, gosh, I wish they would have just married that person they were dating before me because they wouldn't be in this place. They wouldn't have to be childless. They'd know what it felt like to be a father. And I know that you sometimes judge yourself for looking at them as though things were so much easier for them than they were for you. And that's okay. They were in ways easier for them. Their bodies didn't have to endure the things that we endured. But part of being a couple and part of the reason that you're probably still together and wanting to work through your relationship is because you know you married somebody who won't make you feel like it's your fault, because it's not your fault. If there was something that you could have done and a magic wand that you could have just flashed in the air, I bet you that they would have done everything to make that wand work for you. But the wand that we dealt with told us different things. So when it comes to being in a relationship with somebody that you thought, like, you probably handpicked your husband thinking what he would have been like as a father. You probably handpicked your husband thinking, oh my gosh, like, our pregnancy photos were going to look so cute together, or the traits that they had that would have created this perfect baby for you. Because if you're anything like me, I thought, I'm going to have a tall kid because my husband's 6'6.5". He's super tall. And I loved that I was marrying someone tall because I thought, oh my gosh, it'd be so great. I'm 5'8". He's 6'6.5". We're going to have this tall kid who's probably going to be a great athlete. My husband's also super smart. He was a mathlete, total brainiac. He's a successful dentist, somebody who loves to challenge himself mentally. And I chose him because I thought that those would be good traits to pass along to our child. And so when you don't have a child to pass those traits along to, you might find yourself wondering, what was all this for? What's this relationship going to be like? What is it that's going to keep us together the next 40 or 50 years of our lives and feeling interested and in love with each other? And you might feel a lot of guilt that you think that way. And you might think, gosh, what kind of wife am I that I'd even question the bond I have with somebody who's stuck through me or stuck with me through this? And it's all very normal. This is all stuff that I work on with my students and Thrive. And I want you to know that you're not a bad person for questioning this or thinking this or wondering this silently. Because I'm guessing that it's probably not easy to tell your husband that you're wondering what's going to keep you together, what's going to keep things exciting, what's going to keep things fun. And maybe if you had that conversation, it wouldn't go so bad. Maybe you're harboring a lot of question about your relationship, and maybe he is too. And maybe it doesn't have to be from a place of, oh my gosh, they're going to leave me, or we're going to get a divorce over this. But maybe this is a good opportunity to start to establish some goals together as a partner and as a union and as a married couple. Like, what do you want your future to look like if it's not going to be with children? Because our relationship, I'm going to tell you from my personal experience, we went through this lull in our marriage. And there's days that we have that lull and it comes and it goes. And if it didn't come sometimes, we wouldn't know that we wanted to work on these things. But there were times after our journey ended where we sat there. I specifically remember like sitting there, just feeling like in my brain being like, is this it? Is this all I got? Like, we got nothing fun to talk about. We don't really do much together. We work our asses off. We come home, we eat dinner, sometimes open a bottle of wine, talk about what happened at work, talk about whether we liked what was on the table for dinner, then clean up dishes, go sit at the TV and watch TV until it's time to go to bed. Intimacy wasn't super important because we were exhausted of trying to be intimate in order to create a child. It felt like intimacy was more of a order from your doctor than it was a desire. So there was this void in our intimacy, and things started to feel like I didn't know if it was going to work. And it wasn't until I decided that I wanted it to work that I decided to talk about it. And when I talked about it, he was feeling the same way. And instead of being like, oh my gosh, he's a horrible husband, or oh my gosh, I fear him leaving me, or oh my gosh, like our marriage is just going to totally stink for the next 40 or 50 years, we got really closer because of it. And it's allowed us to have these continuous conversations. It's allowed us to see that having conversations about what doesn't feel close for us, or what doesn't feel like it's moving us in the direction that one of us wants to move, having those, like the freedom to say what you want to say from a place of not looking at yourself in the mirror being like, oh my God, I've been horrible, or oh my God, how dare he bring this up? Does he not know how hard I've been working on this? When you have it from a place of like setting the ground rules of, I'm talking to you about this because I want this to work. I want us to ride off in the sunset and love each other and be together forever. And yes, sorry, I'm getting emotional because I think about that. Like, that's really what I want. And I want us to be there for each other and see each other through our darkest days, because we have already done that. And I can't imagine that there are going to be days that have been darker than the days that we've experienced in our relationships. But there might be. And if we face those days, I want us to go into it. And I bet you do too. I bet you want to go into the rest of your life with your partner, knowing that you can get through anything. And the way that you get through anything is talking about it and establishing that the communication about it is not to point fingers, is not to say one person's more at fault than the other. It's to establish what you're looking for and know that those things might change. What you're looking for this year might be different as you grow as a human. I know that that's been my experience. As I become more evolved through the thought work and through the tools that I teach through life coaching, my desires in my relationship have changed. I'm not the same person I was when I got my infertility diagnosis, or when we left our last conversation with our doctor, knowing that we would never be biological parents. As you change, your desires are going to change. Your interests are going to change. Your curiosities, the things that you might want to explore together might change. And it's all okay. So as you're thinking about this Valentine's Day and wanting to love the person that you said yes to and the person that you chose to be your spouse, decide, like, what does that look like for you? What are the things, even if it's 2 or 3 things, what are those things that you just absolutely frickin' adore about your partner or about your husband? What are the things about them when you're sitting there quietly thinking about them, what are the things that make you laugh out loud about your partner? What are the things that make your heart swell because they are a certain way? Or what is the thing that they do that you're so appreciative of? And it doesn't have to be countless things, because sometimes I got to be honest, there are days when it's hard for me to come up with one thing that I love that he does. And then next thing you know, he shows up coming home from work the next day, and I absolutely love him to pieces. So let's just find a few things that fit into those categories for you. And when you think about aging together and growing together and caring for each other, who do you want to be in that relationship? How do you want to show up in that relationship? And can you forgive yourself for some of the ways that you looked at your relationship in the past? You are going through some hard things, and you might carry a lot of guilt for who you were in the past, but those things are done. You're still here, you're still married, you're still with this person who you clearly want to make things work with. So decide, who do you want to be in this relationship, and communicate about it. Have a conversation. Call them aside and say, for example, Jack, I know that things are looking so different than we both thought they would when we got married. And I know that we're both grieving in our own ways. And I know that you can't fully understand what I've been through. And I know that I don't fully understand what you're grieving and dealing with. But regardless of what we're grieving and dealing with, I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that I want this to work. And I know that neither of us were planning on this, but I would love for us to talk about ways that we can make this marriage work for us, and that we can create a love that grows as we grow, and that we can find ways to challenge each other, that we can find ways to give ourselves some awareness of what we want, to give ourselves some space to grow independently, and maybe see how a conversation like that would go for you. Because I know that you might feel like your marriage is at like a loose thread, and that is okay. I don't know that a marriage is always supposed to be great. There are days that I want to strangle my husband, and I love him so freaking much, but there are days that he drives me absolutely nuts. And those days come and those days go, and I bet the same for you. So as you're thinking about your Valentines and the things that might be special about your love for you and your partner and your relationship together, consider this podcast and think of ways that you can work through your relationship that focuses on who you are today and who you want to be in your relationship in the future. So I hope you have a beautiful week. I love you. And remember, it's never too late to discover your meaning. I'll talk to you next week.